Hello, my name is Michelle Christ, and we're going Go for No by Richard Fenton and Andrea Waltz. Chapter 24. No doesn't mean never. After we finished the 18th hole, Eric suggested we have lunch at the Pebble Beach Clubhouse, and soon I was enjoying the best BLT I have ever had. So did Kurt and Cheryl answer your questions? Eric asked. Yeah, they sure did, I said, nodding. Good. Well, if you don't mind, I have a question I'd like to ask each of you, Eric said, looking to Kurt and Cheryl. Sure, of course, they said in unison. It's the same question for both of you. The question is, besides the basic concept of going for no and increasing your failure rate, what is the one piece of advice you'd offer to anyone who wants to be outrageously successful at selling? Ladies first, Kurt said to Cheryl with a devious smile. Gee, thanks for putting me on the hot seat, Cheryl kidded. This is not a test, guys, Eric reassured them. I just want my brother to learn everything he can from your experience. Well, Cheryl began, the best piece of advice I can offer is to learn that no doesn't mean never. It means not yet. Statistically, research shows that 44% of salespeople give up after one no. 22 more give up after the second no. 14% give up after the third no. 12 more give up after the fourth no. What does that come to? I did some quick math in my head and said, 92%, I replied. Correct. 92% of all salespeople give up without asking for a sale the fifth time. But research also shows that 60% of all customers say no 4 times before they finally say yes. That means the quickest way to separate yourself from the rest of the pack is to get at least 5 no's from everyone you try to sell to. And you track that? I asked. Absolutely, she responded. I can look at my records and tell you exactly how many times each prospect has turned me down. I never leave a prospect's office without getting at least one no, because a no is always better than getting a let me think about it. In what way could that be better? I asked, intrigued. Because when I get someone to say no, I can immediately move to the next step, which is to ask, why? Let me think about it teaches me absolutely nothing. But if they say no, I follow up with a why. Now I'm on the verge of discovering what I need to know to make the next sale. And usually she does, Eric added with a smile. When a potential customer says no, most salespeople hear never. But when I hear it's not yet, Cheryl said in conclusion. That reminds me of the Alan Breed story, Kurt said. Who is Alan Breed? I asked. Do you have an airbag in your car? Kurt asked. Sure. Well, that airbag is there because of Alan Breed. Back in 1967, Alan Breed began offering the airbag sensors he invented to Detroit automakers. But the big three told him to get lost. They weren't interested in such an expensive item they perceived as unnecessary. But Breed didn't go away. Not only did he keep pestering the automakers, but he also invested huge quantities of time and money lobbying Congress. Finally, after 20 years after he started, Congress passed legislation mandating the use of airbags. 20 years? That's some kind of failure quotient. You haven't heard anything yet, Eric interjected, nodding for Kurt to continue. It still took another 10 years before his first big sale was ever made, Kurt said. In 1995, almost 30 years after Breed's first rejection, Breed Technology sold 23 million airbag sensors for a net profit of almost $120 million. I think it's fair to say that most people would have heard no, Eric said, but Alan Breed chose to hear not yet. And that story brings up another question, said Cheryl. Did Breed earn $120 million in 1995? Or did he earn $4 million for every year he was willing to hear no? Okay, Kurt, you're up. Chapter 25, The Big Enchilada. Shifting in his chair and turning his attention to the tanned, handsome salesman, Eric said, Okay, Kurt, you're up. Well, I'd have to say my advice would be this. If you're going to fail, fail big, Kurt said. Elaborate on that, Eric encouraged. Well, what I mean is simply this, Kurt continued. Common sense says that if you're going to get a no from somebody, get it from a client who needs 20 copiers, not just 2. Get rejected by the purchasing agent from the company that buys 40,000 gallons of cleaning solution every month, not just 40. Think about the numbers for a moment. If I call on 100 accounts that each have the potential to lease 2 copiers from me, and the closing ratio is 10%, then I end up with 20 units out the door, right? But by focusing on accounts with the potential to lease 20 copiers, I only need to close 1 sale and get the same 20 units. So you're saying to avoid small accounts, I summarized? I have nothing against calling on small accounts. Small accounts grow up to become large accounts, and they can often be more lucrative. I'm suggesting that there are many salespeople who intentionally avoid going for large sales because they're afraid of blowing the big one. This is silly. In the end, a no is a no, regardless of the size of the account, but the reward for the yeses are huge. Chapter 26, Failing Exponentially. Eventually, it became time for Kurt and Cheryl to turn the tables on my twin. So, Eric, it's your turn. What do you think the single most important factor in becoming outrageously successful at selling? Cheryl asked. I've spent the last 3 days espousing my views on the subject. I'm sure Edward has had enough of my advice. I can never have enough of you, I said with a chuckle. Okay, if you insist, he began with a smile, but understand, my viewpoints these days come from a management perspective, and I'd like to offer 2. For starters, I'd say that the primary key to creating outrageous success is to understand the need to fail exponentially. After all, one person can only fail so fast. Great leaders help everyone in their organization to understand the need to fail faster. Take a company with a sales force of 100, for example. Imagine that each of the organization's salespeople were to increase the number of no's they received by 5 a day. Not the number of people they sell to, but the number of no's they get during their current sales opportunities. Like Cheryl was saying before, I offered. Getting a no or even multiple no's from every single person you sell to. Exactly. When you do the math, it would look like this. 100 salespeople multiplied by 200 working days a year multiplied by 5 additional no's per day would equal 100,000 additional no's per year, without increasing cost whatsoever. The impact on organizational results is monumental. Kind of like the classic Thomas Edison example I added, where the newspaper reporter approaches Edison and asks him what it feels like to have failed 10,000 times to invent the light bulb, to which Edison replied, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've simply discovered 10,000 ways that will not work. Yes, Eric replied. But what most people don't hear about is what happened next. Edison went out and hired a bunch of inventors to work in his laboratory with him, knowing full well that every inventor he hired was nowhere near as smart or as talented as he was. Well, why did he do this? Because even with 10,000 failures under his belt, Edison did not think he was failing fast enough on his own. Edison is the poster child for what can be accomplished when you put failing bigger, failing faster, and failing exponentially together. He literally lit the world. Exponential failure requires someone in the organization to be an exponent, in other words, an advocate or spokesman of the failure concept and to champion it. But I can't begin to tell you how many executives I've seen who reach the top and suddenly forgot what got them there. They start trying to avoid failure, and when a leader is afraid to fail, everyone in the organization knows it. Not only do people sense it, but they figure that if you're afraid of something, there's a good chance it's something they should be afraid of too. All right, touch back for the last chapters.